to part 3 of our tutorial over Control Manager or CH Control Manager. Today we're going to be looking at setting up simple and complex macros, which are an important part of HOTAS, as well as just general programming with the software. Today we're going to be looking at two profiles. I'll show you a very basic example using my Elite Dangerous profile, and then a more complex version using my Star Citizen profile, because there's a few more things you can do in Star Citizen right now. So this is my Elite Dangerous profile. Now, I've already set this up. Alternate F9 hits shadow view to start recording, because I don't want to be recording all the time, especially in with shadow play from NVIDIA, because it takes up a lot of disk space, about 3 gigabytes, almost 4 gigabytes for every 20 minutes of video. So if I'm sitting there trying to capture moments for video, you know, don't want to be sitting there capturing 20 minutes of me killing federal fighters, which is usually relatively boring, for a 30-second fight with a PvP. So, you know, normally what would happen is I would realize there's PvP and suddenly have to go and either defend myself or attack. And I tried this once to hit alternate F9 on the keyboard, and damn near got myself killed because I took my hands off the throttle and stick for just a second in order to do that. So I decided that I would try mapping it to somewhere that was unused, and right now, you know, this button, in fact, I should go back and remap this to be device 1, button 7, I think. And then I was going to go set this up as Alt F9. What I have found, though, is giving its proximity to secondary weapons control up here, I sometimes hit it in the heat of combat, especially because in Star Citizen this launches my countermeasures, and we'll go over that in a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to device 1. I think this was button 8. I think 6, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, I think we're good there. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Yes, replace. And now we're going to go over to the hat control on the stick, because right now, this is completely unused. I'm not using it, so I'm going to go ahead and pick POV left, and I'm going to take it out of DirectX mode and say, now you can get 2 actions here, actually 4 if you include shift mode, but you can have it perform an action when you press it, and then an action upon release. That's more important for setting up more complex operations, and I'll show you that here in a minute. But you could do this 2 ways. One, since I know what the control is, I want to go Alt, space puts a pause in between, and then F9. Save. And now whenever we go into Elite Dangerous, you know, download the stick. No errors, great. Now whenever we go into game and I want to start recording, I can simply hit that button. Now with Open Broadcaster, I'm not sure. I'd have to check and see if there's a hotkey to do it, but you know, I could do the same. I could have Open Broadcaster open and not recording. I tend to like Open Broadcaster to do any of my recording with my webcams. It will detect the webcams for whatever reason. Shadowplay does not. So whenever I'm doing all that, plus the file size is generally a lot smaller, although the quality not quite as good. So it's kind of a little bit of a trade-off. So that's a simple macro programming. I'm just going to go ahead over to here real quick, the POV right, and let's say that you didn't know what the you know, how do they specify caps lock? Is it caps? Is it caps lock, all one word? You know, let's say you don't know what the mapping is. Well, you can essentially right-click on the field and click on Record Keystrokes. Brings up this keystroke recorder dialog, and you just simply hit, like, Control. Oh, I need to clear. Hold Control F9, and you'll see I pressed left Alt F9, then I released F9, release F Alt. Go to exit, and then it says Alt F9. That's the programming function that you need to put in there. Let's say I wanted to map, since something that I do frequently is recenter TrackIR. That's would be function F12. Well, let's say I think that's what it should be, but I don't know for sure. I'll just go over here and say record keystrokes F12. Well, I thought that was supposed to work. Huh. That's interesting. It didn't work, but it should be F12. No idea if that's going to actually work or not, but we're going to go ahead and save it and see. I have a feeling that right now, since I do have TrackIR on, let me exit out of there. Now let's see if it'll let me do it. Yeah, okay, that was what it was. TrackIR was taking control of it. So F12, that would now anytime I pressed up there, that would center my TrackIR. So you can use it to interface with your other peripherals, other programs for video recording, things of that nature. Maybe they aren't necessarily combat requirements that you're using. But let's go ahead and save that. And let me see if I can find I wonder if it's in downloads. Yep, okay. I need to move that to my maps folder. But here's my map for Star Citizen. Now in Star Citizen, you can do some very, very interesting features. And here's what you do if you want to chain together a series of commands. For instance, let's look here. The left button, button 8 by default. I actually have it set to button 3 for launch countermeasures, or more specifically, launch flares. But then button number 7 down here, what would traditionally be hat 1 down, or button 7, notice how I have it press X, which in on the keyboard will switch to chaff or toggle your countermeasure type. Then press Z to release, and actually this should be Z plus X. So what this will do is it enables me to press right, launch a flare by default. But let's say I want to launch chaff. I press down, and whenever I do that, it will press X, which toggles to chaff. Then whenever I release it, it deploys the chaff, and then hits X again to switch back to flare. Else, whenever I did that, the next time I went to hit this button over here, it would fire chaff. So I could set this up to toggle between chaff and flare, but in the heat of combat, I want to have both options available. Now, in a game like Falcon BMS, it's very typical, and you can actually set this up within its settings, that whenever you hit countermeasures, it fires, whatever you want, 2 flares and a chaff. So you could do that, if the game option allows you to do that, or you could program that into the actual stick using macros. You could literally program it to say, I hit countermeasures, and that would look like something about like this. If I wanted to fire, let's just go ahead and use this. Let's say I wanted to fire a flare and 2 things of chaff anytime a missile's coming at me in Star Citizen. That would be Z plus X plus Z plus X, X plus Z. I know it looks like I'm solving an algebraic equation here, but if you follow this, fire flare, switch to chaff, fire chaff, switch back to flare, fire flare. This would very quickly fire flare, chaff, flare. And then on release, it would actually fire another chaff and then switch back to flare. Probably here, if I was going to do this, I would just bind it back, and then it would be set back to flare upon release. So that gives you an option of what you can do with macros. Let's look at another option here. I have this set for control plus control caps, and on release hitting caps again, although it should be control caps caps. I haven't finished setting all of this up, but this is this turns off comm stab. This should toggle to decouple mode, turn off con stab, and eventually I want to map it to, as long as I hold this down. Now this is where it kind of gets interesting. I press, so I'm holding it down. That disables. I really want it to disable or switch to decouple mode, disable G safety, disable con stab, and then whenever I release the button, it turns it all back on. So as long as I'm holding that switch with my pinky button, we're going around, and it basically toggles everything I want it to do. You can do that with the software. Crap, I forget what the other command is in Star Citizen. I have to look at a key binding chart. Needless to say, I didn't get this all set up the way that I wanted to. I've been experimenting with different setups and things like that. Again, this goes along with the program it and set it up the way you want. But at any rate, that's the basics of programming macros. If there's a space in between the two keys, it will essentially activate them at the same time. Press this one first, this one, and then do the release. You saw that come up. If you use the plus sign in between them, that chains events together as like a macro. And make sure that you do put a space in between there. Let me double check and make sure this will compile. Yep, there we go. So Z plus, that just changed an event by putting a plus sign in there. So that's just a couple of quick examples of how you can use CH Control Manager in either Star Citizen or Elite Dangerous or any other game to chain together commands and things of that nature. So thank you very much for watching. Again, if you like this series of videos, I will be repeating this. I have one more to do over CH Control Manager, and that has to do with CM scripting, their scripting engine, which is actually quite powerful. In fact, all this really does is create a script. And we'll go, actually this includes one, and this is, the Star Citizen profile is originally based off of one for Starlancer, written by somebody named Andy a long time ago. And then, we'll get into the ins and outs of the CMC. Because whenever you create a binding file like this, it will do a, CMC and CMS files. So we'll get into that next time. I will forewarn you that episode 4 could be an hour to 90 minutes long, because there's quite a bit of stuff to cover. I may end up even splitting it up into advanced, intermediate, and basics, intermediate, and advanced programming functions. If you've never really programmed anything, it's not that difficult to figure out how to do it. However, I would dare to say that for 90 to 95% of CH users, what I've just shown you here today will be perfectly sufficient to do anything you want to do in just about any game you want to do it in. The only time really where it starts to come in handy is when you want to program in different modes and things of that element to use the scripting engine. So, I mean, you could in theory do some very crazy stuff in the scripting engine, but we'll start getting into that next week. I may try to drag this series out as bad as it says until the middle of August, and then I'll be on vacation for a couple of weeks in late August, early September. Um, and then after that, I will probably go into doing basically the same thing with Thrustmaster's Target software with the T16000M and the display things I have, the M multifunction displays. I may touch on eventually SATEX programming software, specifically probably with the X55 versus SST for the X52. I may touch on that as well. Um, and I might even get started on that beforehand. But thank you very much for watching. If you like it, please like, subscribe, share, and see you next week.